April 6, 2024. Somewhere over eastern Ukraine, a small team was preparing one of the biggest strikes of the war against Russia. The orders were simple: move fast, hit hard, and get out clean. By sunrise, both sides would be claiming victory, but only one of them would be telling the truth. At 0340 hours, inside a small command post hidden beneath the earth, a team watched the screen as the first drone lifted into the cold night sky. Then another, and another. Within 3 minutes, 280 drones were on their way, launched from 4 different sites spread across the countryside. Each one had the same goal: a single target deep inside Russian territory. No one in the room knows it yet, but the night was about to spiral out of control in ways they couldn't have imagined. Their target was the Rostov weapons complex, a massive factory that had been producing the missiles and shells raining down on Ukrainian towns for months. Intelligence reports said it was running non-stop, producing weapons day and night. If the strike succeeded, it could cripple one of Russia's key supply lines. If it failed, the cost would be catastrophic. Destroying it could cripple Russian offensive capabilities for an entire year. But as the drone operator guided his drones northeast, Russian early warning systems were already lighting up like a Christmas tree. And then, one drone found something it was never supposed to hit. 4 minutes into the flight, the drone operator's radio crackled with urgent warnings. Russian Iskander missiles had been launched toward their drone bases. The crews had maybe 8 minutes before 700-kilogram warheads turned their positions into smoking craters. Launch teams frantically sent remaining drones skyward, operators grabbing equipment and sprinting for vehicles. Behind them were multiple explosions that shook the ground for kilometers. 2 launch sites were completely destroyed, but the drones were already gone, and that's what mattered. The drones then split into 3 groups. The northern group, 92 drones strong, swung wide to avoid known air defense positions. These weren't fancy military drones with million-dollar price tags. Most were modified commercial units, the kind of thing you could buy online and weaponize in a garage. Their small size made them nearly invisible to the radar systems designed only to spot fighter jets and missiles. Russian operators stared at their screens, seeing hundreds of tiny flying objects that looked more like birds than threats. The southern group faced a different problem entirely. Russian electronic warfare units had created a massive GPS jamming broadcasting signals powerful enough to scramble navigation systems for 200 kilometers. For most drones, this would have been a death sentence, but Ukrainian engineers had anticipated this. When GPS signals disappeared, the drones switched to visual navigation, following highways and rail lines like a road map. It wasn't perfect. A few drones crashed after losing their way, but most pushed through the jamming corridor somehow. Then there was the decoy group. 80 older drones deliberately climbed to high altitude and activated systems that made them look like incoming cruise missiles on Russian radar. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The missiles were detected by the Russians. Fighter jets scrambled from 3 different air bases. Surface-to-air missile batteries spun up their systems across hundreds of kilometers. Every available resource rushed to intercept what they thought was a catastrophic threat to the capital. The decoys never stood a chance, and honestly, they weren't supposed to. Within 20 minutes, every decoy drone was smoking wreckage scattered across western Russia. But they'd accomplished their mission perfectly, drawing away the defenses that should have been protecting Rostov. Meanwhile, the 3 main groups converged on the weapons factory from different directions. The drone operator watched his display as hundreds of tiny icons merged into a single massive formation. They'd lost maybe 60 drones to crashes, jamming, and mechanical failures during the journey. But over 200 remained, more than enough to overwhelm whatever defenses waited ahead. As the first wave crested the final ridge before Rostov, every air defense radar in the city screamed warnings. The Pantsir missile systems protecting the factory faced an impossible math problem. Hundreds of targets versus maybe 40 ready missiles between all 6 systems. Operators launched their first interceptors at the closest threats, already knowing the numbers didn't add up in their favor. The drones didn't fly in a neat formation. They scattered in different directions as missiles streaked toward them, forcing each interceptor to choose a single target. When a missile detonated near one drone, others used that exact moment to slip through the gaps in coverage. Russian systems kept firing, racking up kills, but it was like trying to stop a flood with a bucket. For every drone destroyed, 3 more got closer to the factory perimeter. Then, something unexpected happened that changed everything. One of the Pantsir systems, positioned on the factory's northern perimeter, simply stopped firing. Its operator had realized they were out of missiles and was frantically trying to reload while watching dozens of drones approach unopposed. The autocannons opened up, tracers arcing into the sky in bright streams, but guns can only track one target at a time. It was like shooting at a swarm of hornets with a single rifle, pretty much pointless. The first drones reached the factory at 06:27 hours. They didn't all hit at once, which would have been wasteful. Ukrainian planners had programmed them to strike in coordinated groups, targeting specific buildings simultaneously. The main production hall took 6 impacts within 3 seconds. The reinforced concrete walls that were supposed to protect against conventional bombs simply disappeared in clouds of fire and debris. Before anyone could even react, another wave hit the assembly building where finished missiles were stored, waiting for transport. That's when things got really bad, worse than anyone had anticipated. The explosion from the assembly building was massive, far bigger than the drones themselves could have possibly caused. Stored missile fuel and warheads detonated in a chain reaction that sent a fireball mushrooming hundreds of meters into the air. Windows shattered across the entire city of Rostov. The shockwave knocked people off their feet 2 kilometers away from ground zero. The drone operator, watching through surviving drone cameras, couldn't believe what he was seeing on his screen. But the attack wasn't finished yet. More drones targeted the power substations, water pumping stations, and chemical storage tanks that supported factory operations. Fires merged into a single massive inferno that fire crews couldn't even approach without protective equipment. Ammunition continued cooking off in staccato bursts that sounded like distant fireworks. Toxic smoke from burning chemicals drifted across residential neighborhoods, forcing mass evacuations. The few remaining Pantsir systems had run completely dry of ammunition, their operators watching helplessly as the last waves of drones selected targets among buildings still standing. By 06:45 hours, it was over. The Rostov weapons factory, Russia's second-largest missile production facility, was completely destroyed. The main production lines would take years to rebuild from scratch. Critical machinery imported from abroad before international sanctions couldn't be replaced at any price. Specialized technicians with decades of experience were dead or injured, their knowledge lost forever. Ukraine had traded maybe $10 million in drones for a facility worth billions, proving that even the most heavily defended targets were vulnerable to swarm attacks. Russian officials would later claim they'd shot down most of the attacking drones, which was technically true but ultimately meaningless. The factory was gone regardless. The offensive it was supposed to supply had to be postponed indefinitely while alternatives were found. Production of critical missile systems dropped by 60% overnight. And somewhere in Ukraine, Lieutenant the drone operator downloaded his mission footage to encrypted servers, filed his after-action report, and prepared for the next operation. Because in this war, there was always another mission waiting. The drones would fly again tomorrow night and the night after that, until one side ran out of targets or the strength to keep fighting. The age of drone warfare had begun, whether anyone liked it or not, and nobody really knew what it meant for the future. Old defenses made to stop jets and missiles didn't work against hundreds of small, cheap drones flying together. The rules of war were changing right in front of everyone. Power no longer belonged to the side with the biggest weapons, but to the one that could learn and adapt the fastest. The drone operator's hands shook a little as he shut down his controls, the rush of battle finally fading after hours of total focus. He needed coffee, maybe some food, and a few hours of sleep before it all began again. By dawn, the fire was still burning, and so was the message: even the giants can bleed.